You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, On Three's Andy Staples recently ranked the top 10 quarterbacks in the ACC heading into the 2025 season. Now, keep in mind, being a top 10 quarterback in the conference is not exactly extremely hard to achieve because there's only 17 teams in the ACC. So that's more than half make the top 10. It's not top 10 in the country, it's top 10 in the ACC. And Syracuse did get a little bit of respect. I got to give it to On Three's Andy Staples here because Syracuse did have one of its quarterbacks make the cut as a top 10 starting QB in the ACC for 25. The list, I'll just read it out to you. Cade Klubnik at Clemson, Darian Mensah at Duke. Those were the top two, followed by Carson Beck at Miami, Kevin Jennings, SMU, Haynes King, Georgia Tech, CJ Bailey, NC State, Gio Lopez, North Carolina at 7. Then you had at 8, Eli Holstein, Pittsburgh. 9th was Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech. And then 10th from Syracuse, Steve Angeli. Here are my thoughts on this, all right? And I'd love your thoughts right now in the comments section below. I'd love to hear you all out on where you would rank Syracuse's quarterback in the ACC for 2025. And we'll get to Steve Angeli in just a moment here. But unrelated note to Syracuse, I guess Andy Staples forgot that Miller Moss over at Louisville exists. Maybe he doesn't realize that Miller Moss transferred from USC. Maybe he thinks he's still there. But unrelated, Miller Moss is 1,000% a top 10 quarterback in the ACC in the preseason. The fact that he's not on this, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think he's closer to top 5 than he is to top 10, to be honest with you. But aside from that, I think this is a very fair ranking for Syracuse's quarterback at 10th in the conference. Because in the article from On Three, Staples acknowledges that Steve Angeli may not even end up being Syracuse's starting quarterback, but it's his belief that he'll be the starting quarterback. And that's my belief too, although Fran Brown is sending Ricky Collins to ACC Media Day, not Steve Angeli. So Fran Brown's really keeping us guessing here all around the country. Nobody really seems to know truly who Syracuse's starting quarterback is going to be. But Andy Staples is guessing that it's Steve Angeli. I'm guessing that it's Steve Angeli. Time will tell, right? So assuming that Angeli is the starting quarterback for Syracuse, I believe putting him at 10th is a fair ranking. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. I'd love your thoughts in the comments section below here. I would also put Steve Angeli 10th, but the only change I would make is I would drop Gio Lopez out of the top 10 entirely, and I would insert Miller Moss. Again, Miller Moss has got to be in that top 10. Gio Lopez is a transfer from, I believe, South Alabama, which is in the Sun Belt Conference. He certainly has promise for North Carolina, definitely a wild card for this upcoming season. Nobody really seems to know what North Carolina is going to be with first-year head coach Bill Belichick in 2025. So to me, rounding out the top 10 list, it is a question of, do you prefer a Sun Belt quarterback with some starting experience in Gio Lopez, or do you prefer the less experienced, but also someone coming from Notre Dame who has played at least a little bit in Steve Angeli? Which one are you taking for now? I would take Steve Angeli. Maybe you feel differently. Comment in the comments section below. But that's the only change I would make. I would keep Steve Angeli, though, in the top 10 in the ACC. So hats off to On Three's Andy Staples. The top 10 also shows, in my opinion, that there's room for a quarterback or two to potentially emerge as all ACC caliber this upcoming year. Last season, 5 quarterbacks made an all-conference team. First, second, third team, and we're counting honorable mention as well. Of those 5 players, only 2 of them are actually back. Cade Klubnik over at Clemson and Kevin Jennings at SMU. The other 3 who are not back, Cam Ward at Miami, Kyle McCord, Syracuse last year, and Tyler Shuck over at Louisville. All of them moved on to the NFL draft. I would say right now definitively that there are only about a handful of quarterbacks that you can definitively say are better than what Syracuse has right now at the quarterback spot. Cade Klubnik, not going to argue. Kevin Jennings, not going to argue. Carson Beck, if he's healthy, I'm not going to argue him. Haynes King, also health, not going to argue him. And then Darian Mensah, I think he's going to have a really good year over at Duke. But everyone else, I could see a world in which Syracuse has a borderline top 5 quarterback in the ACC, perhaps as high as 6th, maybe. So very close. And if you're on that bubble, if you're on the door, if you're knocking on the door to all conference, there's a chance that door might open, right? Injuries can happen, which is an unfortunate reality of sports. We never wish injury upon any player, but they can happen. We have to acknowledge that. Underperformance can certainly happen to someone that we're not expecting. I mean, it happened last year with Florida State and DJ. I don't think many people thought that DJ was going to be the worst quarterback in the ACC, but it happened. It's tough to debate because we don't truly know who Syracuse's starting quarterback is going to be. But over the next few weeks and hopefully during the season, that we're arguing Syracuse's quarterback should at least be on the tier of a guy like Miller Moss, maybe CJ Bailey, who I think could have a big year over at NC State, Eli Holstein at Pitt, and Kyron Drones. So hopefully Syracuse at least has an above average quarterback in the ACC this upcoming season. And according to this list from On3's Andy Staples, it certainly looks like it's possible that Steve Angeli could be at least pretty good for Syracuse this upcoming year. And number 4, my final takeaway from this list is that having a quarterback in the top 10 is pretty significant for your team making a bowl appearance. This isn't just Syracuse. This is at least around the ACC. And I charted this out in preparation for this podcast. Last season, okay, so 2024, of the ACC teams that had a quarterback finish in the top 10 in passing yards in the conference, only one team failed to make a bowl, and that was Wake Forest. In 2023, every team with a top 10 passing quarterback in the ACC made a bowl. And then in 2022, there were actually 3 teams in the top 10 that failed to make a bowl with a top 10 passing quarterback in the conference. Those were Virginia, Virginia Tech, and believe it or not, the Miami Hurricanes. So over the past 3 seasons, obviously that's 30 quarterbacks in the top 10, right? Only 4 teams have missed a bowl. So 26 of 30 have made a bowl. Therefore, if Syracuse has a quarterback that finishes top 10 in the conference in passing yards, they are very likely to make a bowl in 2025, even with a tough schedule. That's what the data shows over the past 3 years. Do I think that Syracuse could have a top 10 passing quarterback in the conference this upcoming season? Absolutely. There's 17 teams in the ACC. 17. So it's not like we're asking even that quarterback to be upper half. We're saying, can you at least be somewhat mediocre? That's really what it is. And again, the data says if your quarterback finishes top 10 in the ACC in passing yards, you are very likely to make a bowl.